Got it. Okay, welcome everyone to the Irish American Heritage Museum. Thank you for joining us live on Facebook. We're here with the Albany Firefighters Museum and author Wayne Miller. So tonight is a little bit scrappy because this online thing will be operating as we're doing in tandem at the museum with a full audience in our theatre. So the online audience might be 1 or 2 minutes late, behind the presentation, which shouldn't bother you guys. Because we're doing a separate slideshow for you. So you may or may not see the speaker. He might wander in and out. He will be mic'd up, but he might not stay in camera shot, which is absolutely fine. So we will start this. As I say, we might be a tiny bit behind, but that's okay. And then at the end or during the performance, I'll be monitoring Facebook. So if you have any questions or comments, you can type them in Facebook and we'll get to them. But as I say, our speaker will actually be presenting live here. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over now to Bill Tobler, who's Executive Director. Is that your title, Bill? Of the President or Chairman, yeah, of the Albany Firefighters Museum. So thank you. So you take this and then you can talk to the audience, like you don't have to.
Good evening. I'm Bill Tobler. I was going to say chairman of the board of the Firefighters Museum, but I would be heckled and called out of line for that. So it's chair of the board of the Albany Firefighters Museum. But I want to welcome you tonight. The last time we met publicly was December 7th, 2019, when we had our first official opening at the museum. Tonight is our first public lecture on fire, and I'm going to be welcoming Billy Schmidt, who's on our board, and he'll explain to you a little bit in detail about the author that you're going to meet tonight. So thank you for your attendance. Bill.
Speaking part. You never get a speaking part with Tobler. Welcome to the Albany Irish Heritage Museum. And again, I'm a board member with the Albany Firefighters Museum Board. And a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity in my other role as a fire investigator, traveling the country with the International Association of Arson Investigators to meet our author tonight, Wayne Miller. Wayne is a retired ATF agent out of the Massachusetts area. And he worked in the private sector after that. And I'll just let Wayne talk a little bit more about himself, but he's got quite an interesting story to tell. If you haven't read the book, grab yourself a copy. It's a real good read. And I'm sure he's going to share the story with us tonight. Wayne Miller.
Thank you. Thank you, Bill. I got to get mic'd up.
All right.
Yeah. I'll control this and you control the one behind you. Okay, no, so this is your one, yeah. And now I can take this off.
I'm good. I can't see anything, but I'm good. Thank you for both the Firefighters Museum, Bill Schmidt in particular, who talked to me 2 years ago about coming out here for some speaking event. As an agent, I don't know if I ever planned on doing this. I've been retired since 2001, and I worked 18 years on the private side. And I started writing Burn, Boston, Burn in 2018. It came out August 2019. But I had 34 speaking events before COVID. 20 of them got canceled after that. And then some people have been kind enough to invite me back out. From here, I'm going to Atlantic City. And from Atlantic City, visiting my daughter in the Atlanta area, and then driving over to Myrtle Beach for 400 investigator conference. And I am speaking there and trying to sell some of the books. Besides Burn, Boston, Burn, only 8 days ago, Bang, Boom, Burn, sticking with the bees, trying to make a little series in a sense. It's a brand new book just came out, and it's 21 short stories as compared to the 480-page Burn, Boston, Burn, which is one gigantic story. So let me tell you about it, because we don't have all night. First, the cover, folks, done by my son-in-law, Mike Clark, who also did my website. On the subtitle, the story, the largest arson case in the history of the country. It should have been in quotations. You can see a period at the end of that up there on the cover. I never corrected Mike to put it in quotations. The reason it should be in quotations is because our U.S. attorney at the time was Bill Weld. Some of you people might know his name. He sort of ran for president a little bit. I didn't do too much with it. But he did become governor of Massachusetts for a while. And but as U.S. attorney, he said to the press, media, when we made arrests in this case, that it was the largest arson case in the history of the country. And he was definitely accurate in 1982. There's some people who might argue with that today, only because a guy out in California by the name of John Orr, one of the most famous fire investigators / arsonists in the history of the country. He never confessed to how many fires he set, but he is in prison for life for setting a fire that killed a couple people. But he never confessed. In my case, I was the case agent on this. We had 9 people involved in a conspiracy. 8 of them were arsonists, and the 9th one I'll tell you about. He joined the conspiracy later on. But we had 9 people who burned, confirmed, 264 buildings in a 2-year period of time. And they did about 100 or so dumpsters at least too, but we didn't even count those. Also, there's a guy named Thomas Sweat who was arrested by Washington, D.C. area investigators and ATF. Thomas by himself confessed to about 350 fires about 10, 15 years ago. And he did it over 25 years or so. But that included sheds and cars and everything else, and dumpsters. So again, we have 264 confirmed fires set by 8 individuals, and the 9th one in the conspiracy. So there's one thing that I did to every single group that I've spoken to. I want to read how many firefighters or retired firefighters in the group. It's hard for me to see. A majority of the audience. Thank you for your service, guys. To all those who have been victims of fires, to the firefighters who fight them, and to the investigators who go the distance, may you all have the strength to carry on. That's my dedication page. It came to me 5 minutes after I wrote this book. Those 4 lines are the original words. I didn't change a thing. It just came to me. It epitomizes what the story is really about. To all those who are victims of fires, because these guys set the 264 fires in buildings that weren't occupied at the time that they set them. Now, some were businesses, but at night. There's victims, there's business owners, there's land owners, there's housing owners, there's the city of Boston owned some of them, the bank owned some of them, and victims with physical injuries. We didn't get civilian injuries because of the type of fires they set, but we had over 200 firefighters injured in this 2-year period. To the firefighters who fight them, you guys have so much respect. I was a lawman in a sense, carrying a gun, a criminal investigator, but I have a closeness to firefighters because I volunteered for the arson group in 1982, and I ended up doing 38 years worth of fire investigation. So I have met so many firefighters and I've worked side by side, and I know what you guys, I wouldn't want to have been a firefighter in my life going into that burning building. I've been on the inside with the gear and set training fires, so I know what it feels like and looks like from the inside. But still, every building is different and the hazards are there always. My father-in-law and brother-in-law were both fire captains in the city fire department. To the fire investigators who go the distance. Now, there's a fair number of fire investigators in this group too. Now, typically, we're not there when you guys are there, unless you're on the city department or fire marshal. But yet the Worcester 6 fire, which is a chapter in my second book, I got there the night it was burning. I saw it on the news. It's about 20 miles from my house. And I went there, and I was there from that Friday night as it burned right through the recovery of the 6 firefighters, and then our investigation afterwards. So I know what fire investigators go through. I know the hazards that we go through. I've seen walls. I've heard, Syracuse firefighter, fire investigator lost his life several years back when a chimney came down. So the hazards are always there, besides the cancer that we all face every day. And may you all have the strength to carry on. So I love to read that to the crowd. Was this on? Now it's on. And it's not listening.
I think the light is.
Yeah, it went green.
That's the danger with these.
Yep.
My God, sorry. Oh,
I have new batteries in my bag.
yeah, sorry. We just used this the other day and we checked tonight. And it
Can I go
worked.
forward then?
I've gone forward on the Zoom one. No, okay, just Zoom, bear with me while I get batteries. Do you have batteries outside? in your bag?
I do, because I took it from my own.
Okay, tiny ones? Careful.
Yes. Thank you for the warning, but.
Does anybody know a joke?
Yeah, been entertainers.
Years ago, we were in the
Magic Mike
theater,
does the fireman's
and
thing.
I was with Jenny and my 2 boys, they were little. And the attendant came in and he said, there's a problem with the projector, so does anybody know a joke? In my room, when Zachary did something, he tracks down the stairs, he gets to him, and he's saying, you're cocky, he's cocky. And the joke was, does anyone know?
The guy asked him, hi, fella, hi, little fella, hi.
No, your one is at the back.
You gonna tell us a joke?
Your one is at the back. That's not your one.
Yeah. Why you trust the nose?
So is it,
It's plugged in.
it is plugged in. Might not reach it.
Oh, it showed we did it the other day. Okay, it's like it says the battery is fully on.
I broke.
Let me just. Sorry. I can swap. Yes, I'll swap. My laptop, my screen, whatever. Jesus. I'll put that one in that one and I'll do this by hand. Okay. Yeah. So we'll swap. Remote control, jeez.
Oh, I can start telling you a little bit about the story anyway. I don't know if this is going to work here. So in 1982, Boston was one of 4 arson task force cities: LA, Chicago, New York, and Boston. The reason is the federal government, after some studies in the 70s, realized that the cities were burning down, some of the major cities. So they started these 4 task forces to start with. They ended up with many more. But Boston had a history of fires. New York, the Bronx was burning. LA had various areas, and Chicago, the same thing. So what they realized that state and local guys could not investigate the fires satisfactorily if they were complex investigations. You guys who are local guys or state fire marshals, you realize that you're running from fire to fire, and you don't have the money, the time, the resources that the federal government gave ATF once the law that we were working on.
So you're going to press this one and then I'll follow you.
Okay,
Because I don't know why that machine up there is not reading this thing. So you change it here and I'll see it on Facebook.
okay,
Okay,
good.
so you're one ahead of me already. Sorry, guys. There's bushes in my office if anybody needs a shot.
It's gonna be you, Elizabeth.
I think it's gonna be me too.
So I volunteered for the arson task force in Boston. In March of 1982 is when it started. Oh, it's going to go by itself, huh?
Did you have settings on it?
I put it back to the beginning and it's not going back. So we had a Boston Fire Investigation Unit lieutenant assigned to our group. He had his own desk, he had a government vehicle, and he was cross-designated as a marshal, so he could be privy to grand jury material and other items. Now, you know, again, local departments, a lot of times, if the fire is fairly simple, if it's an arson and somebody had an argument with their girlfriend or wife and set the fire, it's fairly easy to solve. But some of the complex cases where there's multiple fires or multiple jurisdictions, that becomes more difficult. So it changes on the screen here.
Yeah, because I'm doing this one.
Oh, can you go back? Can you go back one?
That map?
Yes, please. For people who aren't totally familiar with the Boston area, I like to show this map.
So sorry, you're not on this side on that one.
I am.
On the cover of the book.
This one's showing on here too.
No. Yes, okay, there's that. Right, okay, what?
Okay. And where's your laser on this one? You have a laser?
Just, no, I don't know.
Okay. Well, so you can see Boston. It's in large print there. And just to the north, you have Cambridge, you know, MIT, Harvard. The Charles River is that blue body of water between where Boston and MIT. And you got Charlestown is where it says Bunker Hill. Chelsea is a town just outside. And to the south, you have the JFK Library in Dorchester, part of Boston. And you can see the word Dorchester, Rosendale. You can see West Roxbury. You can see Brighton out to the left side of the screen a little bit. And down the bottom, you see Quincy. That just comes in play later on. And you get Needham, Dedham. I don't see Dedham, but it's right down here where it says Route 95, just about. Okay, so the next slide. The reason I show you that one is to get you familiar with the area is because I put pins on the map. These are only the first 107 fires set by this crew. They concentrated on the city of Boston. Now, these guys met at a Howard Johnson's right next to Boston Fire Headquarters. And because of Prop 2.5, it's coming up on a slide. I don't want to go too far ahead. But when they met and started setting fires, you can see almost, you know, a large grouping right down the center from north to south. And that's because we have Blue Hill Avenue that runs north and south and inside the city instead of the highway. And they would branch off of Blue Hill Avenue and set a lot of their fires. And again, they concentrated on the city initially, and I'll explain why. Slide. This group, they all wanted to be firefighters at some point, except for one of them. Greg Bemis was the youngest. He was a dispatcher for police and fire department. He was a call firefighter, and he became a lieutenant. Now, he became a sergeant in the Boston Housing Authority Police Department, a full-time police officer in Boston. And he took his best friend, Lenny Kendall, from out in his area. And Lenny was also a call firefighter. They loved listening to the Boston radios. Greg ended up learning every firebox, you know, the fireboxes that we had on a lot of corners in the city back then, where you can call in a fire or pull the alarm type of thing. And Greg knew all the numbers and locations. They met up with Bobby Grabluski, a full-time Boston police officer who also wanted to be a firefighter. That was his first love. They ended up meeting with Donald Stackpole, the head of a security company, a little short, squat guy who, I call him a 4x4. I don't think he could have been a firefighter if he ever wanted to, but I mean, he did want to at one point. And I think rejection caused him to act the way he ended up acting. Ray Norton, full-time Boston firefighter. They ended up meeting Ray. He was the oldest of the group. Joe Gorman was just a friendly giant of a guy. He actually wanted to be a state trooper, but he was a fire buff. All of them ended up being fire buffs. And you know what buffs are? We have legitimate organizations. In Boston, we have the oldest organizations, the Boston Box Association and Club Box 52. By the way, Box 52, anybody have any idea why they call it that? Boston had a conflagration in 1876, I think it was. And that's when the first fireboxes just came out. And that's what the box number was that got pulled for that fire. So that's why they called it that. But they're legitimate clubs. And I heard Arthur Fiedler here today. We were talking about him earlier. Arthur Fiedler, Boston Pops Orchestra and Symphony Orchestra. He was one of the biggest fire buffs back in the day, 70s, 60s, 70s into the 80s. And the Boston Fire Museum has a whole collection of his helmets that he collected. These guys collect memorabilia, equipment, even fire trucks, and a lot of them like to run the fires legitimately. These guys were legitimate for a while in their lives, and that's how they all came together. They met each other there. Another police officer of Boston Housing, Wayne Sandon, was another member of these fire buffs and became arsonist. This is their first fire, and it is February 19th, 1982. It's about 2 weeks before our arson task force started in Boston. By pure coincidence, they didn't know we were going to have a task force, and we didn't know anything about these guys who became such prolific serial arsonists. So this is what Boston ended up seeing a lot of times. They had a fairly simple device that Greg learned about at a fire academy. Now, if I was teaching this class in 1980, I probably wouldn't tell the whole group what the device was. But now, between the court documents, the book, the internet, I can tell you anything. I'm not going to tell you anything new. It might be something new to you today, but it's really not new. So they'd walk down the street with a brown paper bag. Now, by the way, these guys drove their own Nerf vehicles. They're Nerf crew, okay? They're black LTDs, black Chevy Impalas, and they would drive around the streets of Boston in the middle of the night. A couple white guys would get out in all mixed neighborhoods, black neighborhoods, etc. And, anybody who looks at them is going to think they must be cops, because who else is going to be out there in the middle of the night getting out of a unmarked cruiser type of vehicle? They'd carry this little brown paper bag with a plastic Ziploc baggie in there with Coleman lantern fuel, and then some tissue paper on top of it. When they placed the device either on the outside or inside the target buildings, they would then add the matchbook with a cigarette interlaced through. That's the very simple device that they started with when they set their first fires in dumpsters. Now, why did they start setting these fires? Massachusetts, on November 4th, 1980, voted in a tax measure called Prop 2.5. And a lot of people were mixed about it because, the older cities and towns, and we have lots of them, like your state does, and the property values weren't so high. So if you cut property taxes to 2.5% of the value, let's say you got a $100,000 piece of property, your tax could only be $2,500. So a lot of places it devalued, the tax intake for the cities and towns became less. So they had to figure out how to pay their public employees. So initially they laid people off. So who's the usual suspects in that? School teachers, firefighters, police, right? Boston, I'll just give you Boston because every town had some effect. Boston Fire had 1,700 firefighters in 1980. By 1982, they lost 600 firefighter positions, well over a third of the department. And they closed 22 fire companies. So that happened. So it was voted in November 4th, 1980, same day Ronald Reagan got elected president, same day Greg Bemis turned 20 years old. So Greg was a youngster involved in this big decision about setting fires. Now, I want to tell you something. Full disclosure. I have a friendly, professional, and I'll put quotation marks around my friendly relationship with Greg Bemis today. I just saw him a couple weeks ago. I've taken him out for his birthday. He's not married or anything. He goes by a different name. He lives in Massachusetts. And he and I spent over between 200 and 400 hours after his arrest. And when he finally came over to the government side, when I debriefed him, we took him to every single fire scene, whatever it looked like, a vacant lot, a hulk of a burned out building, or a rehab place, a rebuild. And the same question, we recorded his comments. Greg, who went to this fire? And he would tell me exactly who went to that fire. How did you do it? Oh, we jumped over the fence, we ran through the back, and that's what you're going to read in the book. And some people say, well, it's a little repetitive. Well, I tried to cut it down from 264 fires to around 150. But, you know, I left some of the repetitiveness in the book so you could see that these guys, once they started setting their fires, they set one initially, they set 2 in the same night, 3 in the same night, up to 10 in one night, okay? Up to 30 and 40 in a month. So they were very busy, repetitive. And guess what the investigators were? The repetition of going to a fire scene and doing the origin and cause, trying to figure out how and where a fire started, and then trying to go through the investigation of who could have set it once you determined it was an arson. So there's a lot of repetition. And I wanted people to see that. I wanted the people to see that the investigators, myself, we were running around with like chickens with our heads cut off. We had no clue what was going on. And I'll explain more. Next slide, please. This was the first one in Roxbury, Mass, which is part of Boston. Another fire. Another fire. Again. Another fire. Again. Okay, stop here for a sec. The importance of this one. Now, they chose their targets. They'd ride around during the daytime and write down addresses for their targets. While they're working as a cop, etc., they would ride around. They would make lists, and they'd burn 8 or 10 of them and then add more to the list. This one here is on Dorchester Ave. My accent come through at all? Dorchester. But the importance of this, their targets were, we have a lot of 3-deckers. In the book, I go from saying 3-deckers to triple-deckers. I was told by one of my firefighter buddies, long retired now, he said, Wayne, it's not a triple-decker. That's a sandwich. It's a 3-decker. So, and they're traditionally, they have porches a lot in the front, porches in the rear. And as you can see, this neighborhood is pretty congested. Dot Ave is a very congested and busy street. And they went right between these buildings, and they chose unoccupied, okay? The reason they chose unoccupied was so we won't really hurt any civilians that way. And firefighters would have a better chance of not getting hurt. Because knowing that nobody's in them, maybe they'll fight them from the outside. So that was their story to begin with. And it was because of Prop 2.5. It bothered these guys that so many people got laid off. Greg was really bothered, and Donald Stackpole said, we're not going to get their attention by doing anything but setting fires. So that's what they started. They did dumpsters, 100 dumpsters in a couple days. They're just throwing a matchbook and cigarette right in the back bay. If you know Stowe Drive separates, right next to the Charles River at all. The back of those nice brownstones in the back bay, they all have dumpsters so people can put their trash in. And they set one after another, multiples, and go across the river and just watch it and laugh at the fire department, who didn't even know where they were going, because remember, we had so many fire companies closed, they had to come from outside the back bay, and you didn't have GPS. So you had to know where you were going, and then you had to know what address you were at once you came across a dumpster type of thing. So their favorite targets were these triple deckers. Another thing about their targets is we had a lot of gas shingles, asphalt shingles, the type you have on your roof. Well, in the 1940s, a lot of these were built, and that was a favorite siding all the way down the sides. It's nothing but solid gasoline. So if you put a lighter to it, you can get it to burn, and it goes up to the roof line pretty quickly. And then between a building like this, a little fire science, you get the heat radiating back between the two buildings. It races up to the roof line, carries into the cock loft and into the upper floor windows, that type of thing. This draws a lot of firefighters because of the tight neighborhood. So you're getting multiple companies there and a lot of firefighters. You're tying up fire companies there. Next slide, please. The very same night, June 3rd, 1982. This changed the game a little bit for ATF. We're working with Boston Fire hand in hand. We had meetings with them, trying to get them to trust feds. You watch TV shows with the FBI all the time. Well, ATF was never quite like the FBI. We worked hand in hand. We needed you guys more than you needed us. So, but they set the Louis Sparrow Toy Company on fire. And this is a 1,000-foot long warehouse by 300 feet wide. And it's a commercial building. Now, the difference is ATF could always work fires that affected buildings of interstate commerce. Well, prior to 1982, the explosive law is what we worked under. It was a weird, convoluted way of working fires. You had to show that a building could explode or did explode to work it as a fire. Well, in 1982, President Reagan added 2 words to the federal law. If you damage or destroy a building by means of explosive or fire, that's all he added to the law, or fire. And that was given to ATF as its jurisdiction. And that's how we could now work fires much more easily and just prove what caused it and what didn't cause it. So Sparrow Toy Company was actually a very easy fire to look at. They started it on the outside like a lot, but they did go inside in some of those houses, a lot of those houses. But on the outside here, if we get to show that portion of the video. Next slide, please. With fire companies already tied up on Dot Ave, and now you get this, it went to a full maximum 9-alarm fire in Boston. That's the max. And they have special call outs where they can get, it's not really mutual aid. They don't call it mutual aid, but it's special call out. And that's when they get Quincy and Cambridge, Somerville, et cetera, to assist on these fires. This is still the same fire. Keep going. Same fire. This went all night long. Same fire. Could be seen for about 10 miles away with the smoke. One more. Next slide. Okay. That brought in the national response team for the very first time into Boston. Now, let me explain what the national response teams are. ATF has 4 teams in the country, and they started in 1978. Northeast, Southeast, Midwest, and Western teams. And we respond to any large incident, money-wise, loss of life, injuries, within 24 hours. For instance, I went to the DuPont Plaza hotel fire in Puerto Rico. The fire happened at 3:30 Puerto Rico time, which let's see, an hour before us, on New Year's Eve. And by 8 a.m. in the morning, I was on a flight to Puerto Rico, and I spent the next 8 days. So we respond rapidly. We drop everything. You're on the team, you just go. And so the team came into Boston. And what that does is brings in about 10 agents, chemists, maybe an explosive expert if there's an explosion involved. And it gives the local office and local people who have to invite us, by the way, to come in. It gives us a concentration of experienced agents. So we can join with the state and local guys and do interviews, and join with the state and local guys and do the fire scene. And that fire was set on the outside in the only combustible area in the back of the building. Everything else was non-combustible. They had one section that didn't have gas shingles, but it had tar paper, virtually the same item. And they set the fire there, and it carried into the building. Now, what I'm showing you here, this was the first indictment. We had multiple indictments, supplemental indictments, succeeding indictments. And I just wanted to show you, so the first fire is February '82. And you can see Roxbury, now these are all residential areas. Roxbury, Dorchester, 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 Hyde Park to the southwest corner of the city. Hyde Park, back to Roxbury. Next slide, please. So we got this information from confessions, and that's why we had one indictment, but we had to correct. Everything wasn't always accurate, didn't include all the fires. But as you can see, March, they had a lot of fires. April, only a handful made this indictment. May, next slide, please. You're into June. The bottom one is South Boston, by the way. That's that big fire. Okay, now look at June. Top to bottom, it's only from June 6th to June 19th. And look at June 11th. There's only 4 of them listed here. June 11th was the busiest night in Boston Fire Department history. They set 10 fires that night, and at least 6 of them ended up going multiple alarms. So multiple alarms always means the fire is fairly sizable. And the more alarms you have, the bigger the fire is, and the more dangerous it is with neighborhoods, that type of thing. June 13th was a busy day. Next slide, please. I want to point out June 25th was fairly busy. My second daughter was born that day. My first daughter only being a year old. So guess where Wayne Miller is supposed to be? He's supposed to be with his wife and 1-year-old and a newborn. Well, I am, but you know, my heart is torn to be out working these fires. You don't have cell phones to get a hold of anybody. So you have to call somebody in the office saying, you know, do we have any information on these fires? So they were busy, you know, throughout the entire summer. Investigators still didn't know what to do. Suspects wise, where do you start? Fire buffs go to fires a lot. And so you have the same people in the crowds a lot. It doesn't mean the fire setters, they like watching fires and taking pictures. Now, some people did not particularly care for a couple members of this group, only because they were loud, boisterous, nasty, that type of thing. But that still doesn't make you an arsonist. How about any of the 600 firefighters who got laid off? How about board-up companies? How about, you know, businesses that still could be set? And you have to investigate each one as an individual event, because businesses could join in and set their own building on fire at that point, or a homeowner. Just because there's so many fires, let's set a fire. Next, please. You know, this one got set on the inside. And again, the firefighters are stretched out. Now, their knowledge of the fire department, and Greg in particular, not only did he know where all the fireboxes, he knows what fire company is what we call first due, the first in firefighters, the first one who's supposed to be responding to that particular address. He also got to learn if you steal fireboxes, which 14 were missing from Boston that year. Typically, there's only one might get hit by a car on a pole and then missing or something like that. Well, there were 14. These guys were cutting them off the pole. Now, think about it. If someone sets a fire across over there and there's no firebox, in a residential neighborhood in the middle of the night, not too many people who might be driving by, period, but would knock on the door of a house. It's kind of not the neighborhoods in some instances to be doing this. And then how do you call it in? You might be lucky to find another firebox, but as time goes on, every minute that fire is growing, right? Or you might find a payphone, but not too many in residential areas. But even if you did, the receiver could have been cut already, so vandalized. So it's very difficult. These fires are growing. So you set that fire over there. Finally, the fire company comes over there and they set fire over here where the fire company just vacated the area. So now the next fire companies come from even further away. So again, Boston Fire responded to fire after fire that looks like this one. Next slide, please. This comes from the Boston Fire Historical Society. Again, it is June 11th. Now, they only have 4 on here. That doesn't mean there was only 4 fires. I think that's the time. 12 minutes past midnight, 1 o'clock, and 2 of them just after 3. That might be a box number. And then the next column where it says 9635, that's the number of alarms for that fire. Brookside Avenue happens to be the picture on the cover of the book. And that was taken by Greg Beamish, that picture, by the way. And I give him credit on the back. Yeah, I know. It's a weird thing. They said it twice during the summer because the building was so large that both fires almost looked identical. So a 9-alarm fire, then a 6-alarm, and then a 3 and a 5. These guys were so busy. Next slide, please. That's what Brookside Avenue looked like. That's very similar to what you'll see on the cover of Burn, Boston, Burn. Now, you can only imagine. You can continue with the next couple. Just stop briefly as you go. Next, oh, you're up there already. I'm not there. I'm looking for my screen to go. Well, you saw the chief there. He had no water yet on that fire. And you can just imagine he's shrugging his shoulders at some point saying, what are we going to do with this, right? When you have limited resources, they're not putting that fire out until it burns all combustible materials, basically. Next, please. You can keep going until something changes. It's okay, right there. That's night of June 11th too. Norwood, Massachusetts is approximately 13 or 15 miles southwest of Boston. Norwood's engine was the first engine at this particular fire in Boston, 13 to 15 miles away. And they didn't even know where they were going. Nat Whittemore, one of my best friends. By the way, these are all Bill Noonan fire photos. Bill Noonan's famous in Boston. He has his own photo books out. He was a Boston firefighter and he did 35 years as a photographer. He's got some great photos. But Nat Whittemore worked for WBZ Channel 4 in Boston, and they had him working nights covering these fires. The beauty for Nat is he's a member of the Boston Sparks Association. So his job was his hobby, and his hobby was his job. So I have video that you're going to see a portion of that Nat Whittemore took. And they're out there running around night after night. And he ran across an out of city company that was going the wrong direction. And that had his own like siren. I don't know if he had, I think he had some sort of wigwags or something. And he pulled over the fire truck and said, "Follow me. I'll bring you to the fire." Next, please. I love this picture. Here we have a triple decker, a 3-decker, and he's not going to put it out. If he gets water in that hose, he doesn't have a charged line there. But it just, it's a beautiful silhouetted shot, they might be able to protect that exposure over there. This particular one was set in the basement in the bottom right corner there. So, but they would go in these places, and there's a lot of plaster and lath, broken walls, and lath is nothing more than kindling wood, and a lot of trash, and they'd set these fires. Go ahead, please. And you can keep going. Okay, stop there. So Stackpole was the meanest, nastiest individual in this crew. And he tried to be a member of the Boston Sparks Association, as did Ray Norton, Boston firefighter. They were rejected several times by the club. They hated the Sparks, and that's the nickname of the group, the Sparks. They hated them. And January 1983, now we're almost a year into the fire spree. The Box 52 had just vacated that floor where you see the highest flames right now. And the Boston Sparks had their club on the top floor of this building. And they lost an awful lot of memorabilia in this fire. This was well-planned fire by this crew of arsonists, and they would have gotten away with it if it wasn't for what we finally broke this case. Forward, please. There's 2 or 3 of this particular fire. You can go ahead. Okay. Now, again, you guys who are firefighters, you realize this is what you face in the middle of the winter in the Northeast or the northern half of the country in the wintertime. And, personally, my coldest fire was 18 below the entire day in St. Johnsbury, Vermont. And my hottest one was only 95 degrees, humid, but in the attic for 2 days collecting the evidence on a neon lighting system. So every minute I was just sweating in the soot in the attic. So again, it's you guys with that strength of work in these fire scenes like this. The blizzard of '78 struck Boston particularly hard, and my wife's dad did not come home for about 8 days because of that blizzard. Rescuing people in the flooded out areas because there was a lot of floods from the ocean too, with the snow. So next, please. And you can keep going. The only thing I want to say about this particular fire is this is directly across the street from the very first fire you saw. It was a boarded up 4-story brick, and they went inside and they set it on fire. This was about a year later that they did it. Now, in my mind, I think the firefighters are a little too close to the brick, 4 stories, but maybe because of the 2 dimensions, I can't quite tell how far away. But there's definitely collapse there. The other building was just to the right, across the street. Next, please. This particular fire, which I do have some video of, but you're probably not going to get to see that. But this particular one's right next to the elevated train. in downtown Boston. They didn't set as many in downtown Boston because there's not as many vacant structures, that type of thing. Next, please. And next. You can see the elevated train right there on the, right there. Okay, stop right there, please. So this fire happens in November 1982. And I would like to show video with this too in a minute. So throughout the entire summer, again, we're chasing fires. We have quite a few commercial buildings now. We have origin and cause going on. We have investigation. We have interviews going of owners, of competitors, of employees, of all types of people, witnesses, firefighters. It's keeping everybody straight out busy. And we were no closer to solving this case. Now, you see Dedham Fire Company, that's right on the southwestern side against Hyde Park section of Boston. And Garrity Lumber Company was split right on Dedham-Boston line. And when a fire happens there, both cities or towns respond to it. And the chief from Dedham, eventual chief, became a good friend of mine. And I did origin and cause on both of these fires. But Garrity Lumber, it's a lumber yard. Garrity Lumber experienced a fire October and 4 weeks later in November. Can you hit the next one, please? And go ahead again. And again, because these are mixed anyway. Yeah, and you can go next and I'll talk about this fire. This is a church, stop right there for a second. A church in the south end of Boston, 110 years old. Can you imagine the size of that stained glass window? That's no longer. And what a shot of those flames shooting out. Magnificent. Next. I don't think in this group. The next day, it is a complete burned out hulk. You can stay there for a minute, please. We didn't learn about this. I'll tell you how this happened. This is a letter Greg proposed to the group, and they concurred. They wanted people to know who was setting the fires, in a sense, not by name, but the motive. Nobody, let me tell you, the Boston Sunday Magazine had all sorts of sociologists. The fire commissioner said, you know, it's black kids who are bored during the summer. You know, all sorts of things were coming out. You know, landlords burning their buildings, et cetera, et cetera. Well, they wanted to clear up the air. So let me read it because at the bottom, and I'll tell you what it's about. I'm Mr. Flair. You know me as the Friday Firebug. Now, the newspapers started with the Friday Firebug. I really like to chastise the media for giving nicknames to all these bandits and stuff because they eat it up. They ate this up. Their initial pattern was after midnight on Thursday. So they set an awful lot of fires Friday morning, which they call the Friday Firebug. And Mr. Flair, nobody knows where it came out, but they carried it in the press, and Greg took that moniker on for himself. He loved it. He just ate it up. A young kid, 21, 22 years old now. He loved it. You know me as the Friday Firebug. I will continue till all deactivated police and fire equipment is brought back. Down the bottom where it's a little harder to read. If abandoned buildings are torn down, occupied buildings will be targeted next. Now, that's a threat letter. Today, that is, you know, it's something that's not taken lightly. these guys, besides driving their personal cruisers, besides stealing fireboxes, they called in a threat to the Boston bomb squad. Well, they called in Mass General. They called in a bomb threat at Mass General Hospital. Now, you were there. They called in a bomb threat because one of the fires they set was, the target was right next to where the bomb squad was headquartered. So they watched the bomb squad leave, and then they set the building on fire next to it. They would call fire departments and tell them the Boston arsonist is in town. Aren't you glad the Boston arsonist is here? You remember that fire you had in town a month ago where the lieutenant said it's going to the moon? The lieutenant did say that on the radio. It's going to the moon. Remember that? Yeah. What's your point? Well, pull up your bootstraps because you got another one. You know, that's what they were doing. And here's a catcher. So we're into 1983. This was 1982. It was sent to WBZ TV because they were covering so many fires. WBZ called Boston arson, fire investigation, and they came and picked it up and brought it to the police department for printing. They got a couple smudges. They said nothing usable. Again, you had no suspect. You know, this isn't like an old-time Hollywood cutout, you know. By the way, I do have an agent, and there is a producer right now that's actively looking at doing something with this. I've had about 10 different contacts and nothing happened. Personally, I'd like to see a 6-part miniseries, but I think they're going to do a documentary first, maybe a couple hours or so. So it was on TV in Boston, a show, evening magazine show called Chronicle. It's on every night, 5 nights a week. It's usually main streets and back roads, restaurants, things like that. But they covered the full half hour of this story. So what Boston police did with this was put it in the file cabinet drawer. ATF didn't even hear about it. And we work side by side with these guys. Not that we're miracle workers, but when a confession came through and we heard about it in the confession, we sought it out and found it in the file drawer and sent it to the ATF lab. And by then we had suspect. But they also came back with usable fingerprints at the ATF lab. And it matched Greg Bemis. So can we put on video, please? The only thing is we can't play the whole thing. So let the first fire go. That's Sparrow Toy. And you can cut the sound if you can do it over there. That's not Sparrow Toy.
We played this before we came.
Yeah, you got your movie icon right down the bottom. Ah. Well, let me give him the story anyway. Can you cut your volume, please? So, you know, Sparrow Toy, it just shows that particular fire, and it shows a couple during the summertime. It shows the dangers of the collapsing buildings with the firefighters. Now, again, remember, you got so many less firefighters on the street, and they're straight out all summer long, and they're tired. But this weird thing was going on. Like, they have a picnic with the Boston Sparks, and a lot of Sparks were firefighters. And they have this picnic, and Grabluski, the Boston cop, and Joe Gorman in particular, and I think Greg Bemis went to it, they go to this picnic, and they have good friends. They used to go to firehouses and have dinner with these guys. So they have a lot of friends who are firefighters. And such a weird time that they said, firefighters would say, geez, this guy, whoever burning these buildings we'll take up a collection for him. He's got to be going through a 55-gallon drum of gasoline. You know, it's a very unusual and strange thing, but with firefighters like to work fires, first of all. They're not there just to sit in a firehouse. So they were active and they enjoyed that part. And they realized that these number of fires might have some effect to get people back on the job. Now, for the arsonists themselves, they loved hearing that. And this became nightly entertainment for these guys. It wasn't no longer just Proposition 2.5. It was nightly entertainment, and they became addicted adrenaline junkies. They loved doing what they were doing. So there is a combination, and the psychology goes very deep into a lot of this. But it wasn't until November 21, the second Garrity, when Nat Whittemore is with Cambridge Arson Investigator, who happens to be a photographer too, Eddie Fowler. And they split up because they see some tire tracks on the grass. And the fire hose is on top of the tire tracks. So that, to them, that showed somebody drove over the grass before the fire trucks got there. And they see a car or two that belonged to this group that they didn't like. They didn't like Stackpole. They didn't like Norton. They didn't know who Bemis was. I don't know if they knew who Grabowski was by name. But they split up and they start looking around. And all of a sudden, Nat Whittemore comes around a pile of lumber. And Nat used to wear a vest and carry a weapon because he was in a lot of dangerous situations. So he comes around and he hears this crew. This crew used to root for the home team. Who's the home team at a fire? Fire. A fire, exactly. They would root for the fire, loud, boisterous. They would hope that the fire wins, not necessarily hurting firefighters, but hoping that they did. Back in October 2nd, 22 firefighters got hurt, collapsed roof, came down through the roof, broken backs, broken legs, burns. That was the most serious fire of all of them. Nobody died in any of these fires. Somehow, by the grace of God, nobody died. I don't know if we would have gotten the confession, or maybe somebody would have felt so guilty they would have confessed earlier. I'm not sure. But when Nat swung his camera around at this crew, the Boston cop reached across to his shoulder holster, wasn't in uniform, he was off duty, pulled out a handgun and waved it in the air with real loud, ugly voice for about 2 or 3 seconds. His friends are saying, he's taking pictures of you. So he put it back. They're laughing. And it's Joe Gorman. That was Bobby Grabowski. Stackpole is squatting on a pile of lumber. Greg Bemis is standing next to him with his arms crossed. And then looking to the right, not on camera, is Ray Norton, the firefighter. Because of that film, we were invited to they never showed it on TV. We were invited to WBZ studio. We found out the names of more of the group. Knocked on the door. I knocked on the door myself with my partner, Billy Murphy. Not an Irish kid, from Boston. But Billy and I interviewed Grabowski. He lied straight to our faces, not nervous whatsoever, but on the floor, right over there on the floor in his living room, one of those fireboxes. Billy puts his trench coat on like he did every day, and he walks over there and says, oh, my grandfather loved to make lamps out of these things. The only reason he walked over, box 1712, he could read the number, 1712. That was south of Boston. We both live south of Boston. It's now about 8:30 at night, long day. We both went back into Boston because Billy, under his desk blotter, had the list of boxes missing that day. And box 1712 was the first one missing.
Hey, you want to take like 10 minutes? and
Oh yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't give you guys a break.
Then you guys
Yeah.
can figure out the video.
Yeah.
We got light refreshments out there. We're asking for a contribution of $10 towards tonight's event. And you're welcome to come out and take a break.
I get talking, folks. I can't help it.
Someone grab the lights on. Yeah, twiddle them back to me.
Which one's the suspect? Which one?
That's a technical term.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Especially when it started coming together.
I'm trying to get this. Zoom will come back. You all can take a 5-minute break. Just don't wait for us on Facebook. We'll be back in 5 minutes. I'm thinking that this is a complete nightmare because I'm watching it on 3 different things up there.
You were there, was Leo Stapleton, the commissioner of Boston, or was that before your time?
Oh,
Yeah.